the good thing is that if something has a name next to it, you can be pretty sure that somebody's going to be working on it. And of course, the other thing is the roadmap isn't finished or done. We continue to be open. It's not as though because something is out there and says H1 2020 on it, it means nothing else should come on deck. Like, of course, please, well, let's not talk about deck. It's a dangerous word to use.
It's a living document.
It's a living set of ideas, a living set of principles. And now that our moderator is here, I will let you. Well, no, I will let you. I don't know whether you had thoughts of how you want to introduce it, or so we've just done some personal intros.
Do you want to introduce yourself? Because we already introduced ours.
So, hi everyone, I'm Andy Glover. I run delivery engineering at Netflix. I'm sorry I'm late. We were at another panel discussion that it was awesome. I see some familiar faces, so we're now down here. These illustrious people have given their introductions, so I guess we'll go from there. I wanted to start with kind of what are the, actually you weren't talking about the roadmap on the website.
Oh, yeah, I was mainly discussing that we want to go through and update things like put SIGs as owners on there versus having companies as owners. But I haven't talked about anything that's in there, so it's still a secret. No.
Yeah, let's start there, and maybe we can pass this around. Can you all hear me in the back?
Yeah.
Sweet. So why don't we go down the line and just talk through some of the major initiatives that, well, first of all, even though they did introduce themselves, there are three essentially major corporate stakeholders seated here. Obviously, Google, Armory, and Netflix have quite a few individuals working on Spinnaker doing very high level, or I should say impactful things to the platform. So why don't we start with, going forward in 2020, what are some of these initiatives that your respective teams are focused on? We'll start there.
Sounds good. Yep. This is left to right, right to left. Okay.
All right. So, and just to echo what I was saying a little earlier, it's been an interesting session. I'm just waiting while Andy's messing with this thing. We are not. If I say something now, I don't think that means that is something Google has taken our stuff. Nobody can touch it. Like, these are things that we are interested in and we are going to work on, but most of the things we are talking about are done in collaboration with others in the community, others sitting at this table, others sitting in the audience. And so, yeah, this is not about ownership, this is just things that I think are top of our mind. I think what we're seeing, and from our perspective, of course, I wear a couple of hats in this conversation. I represent Google, and we have some interest to help our customers mainly, and of course I also represent Spinnaker as a project. One of the things that we're seeing that we definitely want to focus on is, from our perspective, we see a lot of companies coming to Spinnaker as a way to get onto Kubernetes. I think that's no surprise to anyone. And I think what we know is that there are two levels of kind of challenges we see if we look at this kind of adoption funnel from starting at the top all the way to success. One of them is the kind of operational challenge of getting Spinnaker running easily and successfully in your Kubernetes cluster. So that's a sort of chunk of work that we are trying to do, and you can call that cloud nativization, you can call it what you like, but the sort of primary goal we want to achieve there is, as a company trying to install Spinnaker in my Kubernetes kind of DevOps setup, that should just be easy. But then beyond that, once you have that up and running, of course, your goal as a company is not to install Spinnaker. Yay, done. No, your goal is to actually get your developers productive on top of Kubernetes. And I think some of the primary things we want to go after in the next couple of months is, there's some toothbrush journeys around Kubernetes, I would say, that we can improve, I think, for sure. Like the basic one is, I'm a developer, I have a help chart in my repo, I want to deploy to my cluster. Something as simple as that. That's actually non-trivial to do with Spinnaker right now. And those are the kind of things that we want to make really simple. And again, like if you go to the roadmap doc, I haven't touched much about the actual specifics about what we're going to do there. These are more the higher level areas, and I think that is somewhat intentional because what's on there as in terms of a detailed feature, that is kind of open to discussion and open to community input. Of course, there are some obvious things you could think of, like sample pipelines or sort of features here or there. The purpose is more, let's think of the goal and then figure out through the technical oversight committees and the various SIGs, that's when we have a governance and a community structure, what the best ways are to do that. So there's a lot of rambling for me, I'll pass it over to Alan.
So Armory's been working with large enterprise companies embracing Spinnaker for the past 2 years. And even today, kind of the whole sequence of install, configure, and operate is still a problem. And we often see those challenges when we help companies adopt Spinnaker. So a lot of our focus now is on making it easy, as Andrew was saying, to DevOpsify Spinnaker within your Kubernetes clusters. So we're building a Kubernetes operator that has, it doesn't just install it, it also has a lot of validation that happens, pre-installation and post-installation, which is where a lot of companies run into challenges with. So then, after you install, configure, and operate, what's next? The next part is onboarding, and that is, again, the big challenge for many companies is how do we move hundreds of our legacy or existing applications onto Spinnaker. Some of those things may not be containerized, and so there's a whole gamut of challenges there, and a lot of companies we work with everything I'm saying is true. A lot of companies we work with, they come up with pretty crafty solutions to solve the onboarding problem. So we would like to find a way to generalize it, obviously with the input from the community, and really make it easy for companies to migrate their existing applications onto Spinnaker. So I know many of you here have created custom user experiences and custom interfaces that sit on top of Spinnaker just to make it simpler and easier for people to onboard. So I'd love to kind of hear what some of you have done there. So the next area that we're focusing on is how can we bring more companies into the Spinnaker ecosystem. And so we're building a plugin system or plugin framework that enables you to plug in, create plugins for other systems of record, whether it's some systems that you've built internally or it's existing tools and existing services like the Jiras, the ServiceNows, other systems that are kind of sit in the path of developers being able to ship code in the organization, which again we find those to be the bottlenecks. How do I integrate all the things into Spinnaker? Spinnaker being a single pane of glass, and if I can't easily integrate those systems, my workflow doesn't work because they all sit in the path of actually successfully shipping software in these companies. So those are kind of the key things that we're trying to tackle at our way, because those are the things that our customers are dealing with, and those are the things that are preventing them from being successful. After that, it's kind of a community project we're working on with Google is how do we collect metrics about what is happening within the community and anonymize them and expose them to everybody, so together as a community we can actually improve a lot of these things and do some data-driven product development, which is not really possible today for the project.
Just as a quick show of hands, how many of you have integrated Spinnaker with some existing applications in your ecosystem? Just really quick, who's done that? Yeah. I figure that if you had not done that, your companies would probably not be still using Spinnaker. So as a result of some of the conversations that have already happened up here, Netflix is going to be investing quite a lot in improving that plugin and extendability story. We've already been working on areas around stages and spell expression functions, but there is a lot of work we're doing with Armory directly on creating a more sophisticated plugin framework. The idea with that is exactly the point. We want to make Spinnaker sticky. We have a lot of internal tools at Netflix as well that we need to integrate that Spinnaker in with, and not being able to do so very effectively makes it difficult for it to extend and have the full impact. Ultimately, this means we want to enable building of communities of practice even within Netflix, but of course within the rest of the community. Within every company that's using Spinnaker, you should be able to enable your other teams to build and connect Spinnaker to the systems and tools that they would like to use. Doing that at Netflix has actually allowed us to use Spinnaker for deployments of things like firmware on our Open Connect appliances and other fast properties, which is our own internal feature flag system. So it's really critical for, I think, the success of Spinnaker as a project. In addition to that, we are very mindful that you probably all have frustrations around the API because it needs a lot of work in terms of making it accessible, better documented. So we're going to be investing a lot in the auto generation of API information from configuration, as well as some additional improvements to make it possible to build off of Spinnaker. So those are part of what we've been terming as Spinnaker's platform within delivery engineering at Netflix. Other improvements that we're looking at are things like multi-location, so active-active for high availability for Spinnaker. This is an issue for us, and I'm sure for many folks as well in the community. And another initiative to call out is what we're calling right now is multi-app experience. We found that a lot of teams at Netflix are interested in having a way to visualize their applications and related infrastructure more efficiently. From a lot of the conversations that I've had with folks here as well at the summit, this is a common problem where you might have multiple applications that relate to each other that a team is managing, and they want a better way to see all of those applications and how they relate within Spinnaker. Excuse me. So there's some initiatives that we're working on to support that. And of course, the big one that I think we've mentioned once or twice is managed delivery. And there is a good article out that we put out about it, hopefully just to give a high-level understanding of what it is. The progress for managed delivery, so the goal with managed delivery is over 2020, we will be rolling that out to many applications inside of Netflix. So we already have it in place for a few applications, select alpha adopters. In Q1 to Q2, we'll be expanding that quite broadly across Netflix and into more business critical systems on the later half of the first half of 2020 to early Q3. So the hope is that as we learn and grow with that technology and engage with all of you, we've had some fantastic conversations, and we'd really love to involve as many folks in the community in that effort, because there's quite a lot of fantastic opportunities and work that can be done that can benefit all of us. So our hope is to continue those conversations with everybody that is engaged in that offline after this summit. So those are the areas that we're heavily focused in. You got it. All right.
This is going to be interesting. So I think you elaborated on some gaps within the Spinnaker, let's say, ecosystem. Maybe there's some gaps on Kubernetes. Clearly, there's gaps around, let's say, the operator install, let's say, experience in Spinnaker. Are there additional gaps that aren't being filled in any of your opinions? And by the way, if you all have questions or comments, feel free to raise your hand. I'll come find you. I'll let them answer. Are all gaps being filled?
You put it that way. No, of course not. I mean, I think that this is where I can do the PM thing and get a little hand wavy. I think one of the things that we had a discussion, a steering committee discussion. One of the things that as we evolve into this governance model, one of the things we need to I think be a little more concrete about and a bit more disciplined about is what's our kind of North Star? Like what are we trying to go for? Like, this market is going in many different places. I try to talk about some themes that I think are pretty big right now in the space. There's do you target the platform team versus the developers? Are you looking for a multi-runtime abstraction? Are you going all in on Kubernetes? Whichever path one takes in the space, I mean, we had examples of are you trying to roll out big data models? Are you trying to do firmware deployments? Are you focusing only on stateless web applications? Like, each one of these questions brings with it a huge amount of potential work and gaps that need to be filled. And I think most of the stuff that we were just talking about is understandably somewhat short term. I think what we also want to do in like the first half of this year is to develop, I think, a more concrete picture for that North Star, so that when it comes to working with everyone to develop where we want to go from there, we can do it in a more early fashion.
Yeah, I think we've covered a bit about the operating experience of Spinnaker and Kubernetes, but then there's a whole developer experience with Kubernetes that needs a lot of work. I don't think we have currently a solid plan for that forward, but there's definitely a lot of improvements that are happening in the user interface. We're talking about potentially leveraging Tecton for some of the orchestration. So there's definitely more conversations to be had there. We have some ideas, but everybody in the community obviously is welcome to participate and figure out what that future looks like.
I mean, I would echo the comments around areas that we would love to see improved in how Spinnaker enables different kinds of deployment. One area that, or delivery rather, one area that is kind of a big gap, I think, is a story around stateful delivery. That's a common need that arises, and many organizations have had to come up with their own ways, us included, in solving that, and I feel like we could do better there. Frankly, error handling, I think, is an area that we absolutely need to be spending more time on. This is both from a developer experience standpoint, but the whole conversation around operations and metrics, how best to understand what went wrong, both as an operator and as a developer. I think we can do a lot better there. So those would be those gaps.
There was a question from
Thank you. I'm glad you mentioned the API. The Spin CLI came out fairly recently, and talking to other engineers, oftentimes they say, okay, I don't care as much what happening on the UI, I want to use CLI. Right now it's a great tool for publishing pipelines, templates, things like that, but real-time and operational data is not available through it. Are you looking to improve the CLI and grow it, or is it going to be a configuration tool rather than full and operational tool?
by CLI, is it how?
Spin CLI.
Spin CLI, okay.
There's the roller. Roller got retired, and now Spin came out a few months ago, or about a year.
Another mic would be great. I have to do a lot of running. One of the Lewises in the room, so kudos. Hey, in the back there, you heard what you need to do now for the next note. I think, yeah, so our plans are to listen to comments such as this. I think that's the fundamental point. I think you had it exactly right. The sort of V0 of Spin CLI was to do the obvious quote-unquote config as code stuff, which is sort of focused on getting stuff set up without using the UI and so on. As we get more validation that people are looking for a more programmatic interaction with Spinnaker, and I think Alex and I were chatting yesterday, where does the developer want to get their data? Do they really want to go to a UI, or do they want to have it in their IDE, or do they want to have it in their GitHub page or whatever? As we develop a clearer picture for where this data needs to be, it makes total sense to suggest, can we get like, I don't know, deployment statistics, current logs, all kinds of things like that in the Spin CLI. I don't think it's conceptually limited to setup only. So yes, I think that definitely fits within the picture of that. I think another similar potentially interesting idea from lots of other tools is things like a UI snippet or a button you can include, say, as a comment in a GitHub PR, and that will show you a little bit of the Spinnaker pipeline, for instance, or a current status or whatever. I'm just randomly inventing features here without a PM, so I get to do that kind of stuff. No, back to your question, yes, I definitely think that's in scope, and I think maybe going beyond that, the area you were touching on, how do developers interact with their delivery flow? What kind of data do they want? Where do they need it to be? And what are the right ways to for us to give that to them? Is definitely a question that belongs, that deserves to be a top level heading for H2 2020, I think, for example.
I just
Do you want to add to that?
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to add that we work with a lot of companies, and a lot of the, I guess, larger Global 2000 is still in data centers. And they're still using very ancient ways of developing things. They're still really keen on web interfaces. And so we're trying to find ways to simplify their journey and enable them to adopt tools like Spinnaker faster. And so we kind of have to, in certain cases, we have to meet them where they are rather than prescribing some other ways of doing things, and meet them with tools that they're already familiar with. So to Andrew's point earlier, could be it's probably going to be a combination of a CLI and a web interface and an IDE plugin. Like we have to I think the punchline is like we have to meet them where they are if we want them to adopt a platform like Spinnaker.
Hold on. The only comment I would make in addition to this is we've discussed how managed delivery might interact with that. So how would you use SpinCLI potentially either submit your declarative definitions into Spinnaker 4 or rather Keel for the managed delivery workflows? That's primarily what we've discussed today, but we would love to, I think as everybody's echoed here, hear from all of you about how it can be leveraged more effectively.
Just to clarify, Alex, the ancient way to interface with things is through the web? And the command line is the new fashion?
That's code.
As code, yes. Yeah. Do you still have a question?
I just asking for a point of clarification on a previous comment. You talked about stateful delivery being a problem for you, and I wish you could elaborate on that. Thank you.
Sure. Andy, you're not going to let me do these panels anymore.
Who invited this guy?
Exactly.
Just answer the question.
By stateful delivery, I mean the versioning of your database schemas, things like this, that currently Spinnaker does not have a lot of pre-built opinions around that, and I think that we can do better there.
I'm going to go that way up and we'll come back to you.
You got it.
Yeah, I asked this question yesterday as well, but I didn't get satisfying answer about plugins. Like if you want to give an example of Jenkins, like they have like 1,500, 2,000 plugins, and it's not really helping the users. And having plugins for Spinnaker is great, but what is your thoughts when it comes to how to govern those plugins and make a better developer and user experience when it comes to ensuring the dependency security issues are actually called by the community? And the answer I got yesterday was like by the commercial version, but that's not everyone wants to do. Like any plans for supporting plugin development and consumption?
Either three of you want to take that? And the answer can be by the commercial one. Michael?
It's easy for me to start because I'm kind of the furthest away from this work. Yeah, obviously the point is clear that we, in our particular part of the industry, we have learned great lessons in how not to do plugins. Obviously, having a single process that tries to put everything on one class path makes things hard. So I'm talking about Spinnaker here. So I think there are some just plain architectural advantages that Spinnaker has over Jenkins if we're looking at that as a comparative model that make plugins potentially less problematic, certainly many of them, and I mean, let's be honest, Jenkins is in the luxury position of having 2,000 plugins to compete with each other. So it doesn't make it easy to manage, but it's a great place to be if you have a community that's that rich. So I think in some sense we're maybe also talking about a future problem, be a nice problem for us to have. I think some things that have happened in this industry that will make this easier, plugin is a complicated word here because you could imagine plugging things into Spinnaker in so many different places. I will let the others talk a little bit about specifically the areas they are thinking about. For me, one of the most obvious places that Spinnaker deserves better pluggability is in stages. You want to have a stage to connect to foobar, random service, backend, COBOL, mainframe thing. And that's actually hard right now. There are a couple of different flavors of doing it, all of which have different requirements and so on. That, I hope, is an area where pluggability can be done easily and safely, because if you're running on top of a containerized runtime system, basically calling a container that can have its own dependencies, that can have whatever actions it wants that we can pass data to, including secrets and things like that, that should be really easily doable. And that should be doable without having to change the core, without having to have any dependencies on this stuff. That's an area of extensibility that Jenkins can't easily do, and that I think Spinnaker and any other container runner system can easily do. when we start talking about things like UI extensions or things like making providers more pluggable, obviously we start to get much closer to the guts of the system, if you like, and that is where there will clearly be engineering challenges because we're talking about class paths again. And I have some idea of what the plans are in that area, but I will defer to people who actually know to answer that one better.
I'm just going to add that as far as the plugins and kind of how we're currently trying to grow the ecosystem is by partnering with companies for them to develop and maintain the plugins. So we're just kind of shepherding them into creating plugins. For example, companies like AppDynamics, the idea would be that they would actually maintain these plugins for AppDynamics. We'll see how that works out, but that's our kind of current path. And we when I say we, Armory, recently hired a partnerships person, and so this person is going out and talking to all of the companies in the DLC ecosystem, trying to bring them to the table, trying to get them to develop these plugins. So we'll see how that works out. But that's the general idea. If we get all these companies to create plugins and maintain them, then our ecosystem of plugins will thrive.
Hi, I have a quick question. Has any plans to add better integration with Microsoft Azure? For example, because right now Spinnaker has really great integration with AWS, but let's say if you want to store artifacts for Spinnaker like on an Azure Blob Store, right now it's missing feature, because right now you can use only S3 and you have to find some other workarounds to do it. So the question is, are you planning to add any better integration with Microsoft Azure?
I'll let Andrew answer that question.
Actually, I can answer that. So there are other stakeholders in the ecosystem not represented on this panel, and Microsoft is one of them. And so I will speak to the PM. He is not here, but he was here. That's a great request, and so it's really up to that team to prioritize that. I think how we can answer this as a panel, though, is as a end user or again stakeholder in the Spinnaker community, how do you bubble up these requests if I have something for Pivotal, or again I have Microsoft, or I have like a deep bug, let's say within Orca, and I want to see it reflected in some sort of roadmap. What's the process by essentially getting you three and others' attention?
So I was going to just comment on this was obviously slight irony of an employee of Google commenting on a Microsoft Azure integration. No, the reality is, like, I've been on your side of this debate with previous companies. There are plenty of companies and contributors in the Spinnaker ecosystem whose contribution is intentionally not strategic but more tactical. That's a totally legitimate thing to do. I think historically Microsoft has been in that class. That's not to be critical of them in any way, that makes a lot of sense. Legitimately, the best way, in my experience, the best way to get a company like that to engage, you call your rep and you say, we have a commit of X, and we can't use it if we don't have this particular feature. It's much easier for you, ironically, to get Microsoft to the table than it is for me. Like, of course I can write a nice email to the Microsoft PM from the Spinnaker steering committee. I mean, I see your face, it's obviously not that simple. But at the end of the day, customer demand will drive vendors to do integration. So never be shy, if you like, to bubble that up. And yes, of course, if we have an issue open and it has 5 thumbs up or something like that, or 10, that is also great data and a great signal to someone from a potential integrator that this is actually something that might be worth doing.
Yeah, in the last panel we talked about how you can raise issues. So if you go to Spinnaker, you can raise this issue, and it will be effectively triaged by a SIG. In this case, there is no Microsoft Azure SIG, but we have plans to create one. And so then that would be ostensibly staffed by Microsoft developers, and they would get that visibility. It would be great. Again, if you have questions, yes, there is one in the back.
So on that note, does the Spinnaker core team see cloud provider implementation abstraction as part of their mandate?
question. There's lots of people in the room that can answer that, so I'm kind of curious who wants to take a stab at it.
So I'll take a partial stab at that. John, I knew you were going to ask that question. I would say that we are looking at making cloud providers pluggable. So that's one point to make. So that is something that is part of the plugin initiative. In terms of having a higher level abstraction above all of the cloud provider resources, there is some mechanisms that may be in place over time for that. I would say that abstraction is in part something that we are interested in managed delivery, not necessarily from a cross cloud provider standpoint, but we do have an interest in intelligent defaults. But I think your question is more nuanced, and I want to be mindful that promising the ocean on those kinds of abstractions is a very risky thing to do, and especially to do it in a speaker like this and record it. But I think that we should discuss a little bit further what that might look like and understand what is possible there.
Can I just get a quick show of hands? How many of you are using more than one cloud provider in production?
Well, that certainly provides great input on. No, I mean on this part of the answer. I think the notion of a multi-cloud abstraction, which, if I were to summarize what you're talking about, is what it is. I have curious biases in this space. I'm a member of the board of the Apache JClouds project, which tried to do this as a Java thing. There's a bunch of other Java or libraries that try to do this. I think right now is a very interesting time to ask this question. Because I think there's two data points that are kind of conflicting, and we'll have to see how they play out, I think, before we can make a choice. The one data point is that, maybe 5 years ago, there was this genuine vision that you could abstractly talk about VMs and network and compute and storage, and you could just magically cross-deploy your same application across 12 clouds, and it didn't matter, and we've seen plenty of products in this space. I think the reality we've learned is that basically nobody does this. I mean, we have a very large user Waze that does exactly this, but in general, multi-cloud usage, as we've seen across companies, typically means they run some workloads on one cloud and some workloads on the other cloud. To Alex's point just now, let's have another show of hands. How many people are running the same application on multiple providers? Well, there's a few, but I would say probably a fifth or a tenth of what we saw just now. And that kind of makes the point, I think, for me. I think that's the one direction in which, like that, I wouldn't say dream, but that kind of vision has not played out. And then in the other direction, of course, we see a resurrection of that dream in some sense with things like Kubernetes, because arguably the dream now is if you want multi-cloud, you just run Kubernetes everywhere. From a Google perspective, that's a great thing to hear. I think it's still very early days for that. I feel very similarly to the way we did five years ago. We'll have to see how that plays out. And as we start to get some more data about how this plays out, I think it will be much easier to answer your question about whether there is genuinely value in a cross-cloud abstraction or whether we just need to support Kubernetes much better or something else.
Yeah, it's certainly worth noting that the direction we took when we built Spinnaker was not to provide a common abstraction, but to actually have a provider for each cloud so you could take advantage of the individual features. And as Michael was alluding to, the idea of managed delivery is that we could add an abstraction on top, and ostensibly we could create, let's say, a load balancer across clouds, provided you gave us enough information, but that's certainly down, let's say, beyond this year.
Hey, thanks so much. My question is more around the roadmap and around developer engagement. Whenever I'm trying to add a feature, like let's say Spinnaker Gate or something, right now if you look, getting set up on Spinnaker, it's kind of like get an 18 gig machine, get this boot up. But I guess it's not just a general question for you folks, but in general for everyone in the room, could we have some sort of cross collaboration of targeted features? Like, hey, I want to add this to, I know this is in Gate, I want to help add this feature to Gate. Can we spin up maybe how do I word this? A development environment on demand. I think I had a good conversation earlier about this, where you don't need to necessarily run everything, you just want to turn it into feature rollout. I don't know if there's anyone that has anything like that, but maybe something within Spinnaker to help gain contributions as well.
Do you want to answer that, Rob? Seated, just yell. Sorry, panel.
Hi, I'm Rob. At Netflix we have this is a major issue for us, is onboarding new developers. And right now it's not the best, but we do have something. And that something is a series of bash scripts that are open sourced on my personal GitHub that we layer on top of for all the secret sauce that Netflix has. In our development environment is we connect to our staging environment from our local machines and only run the specific services that we actually need to be modifying to do the actual feature development that we're doing. And then all the rest of Spinnaker is running out in the cloud where we don't have to have that running on our local machines. One of the things that we're interested in exploring is dabbling with basically a Spinnaker operator that would have a router running inside that Kubernetes cluster of Spinnaker that would then be able to, you'd connect to that router and it would be responsible for routing the traffic either to your local machine or to one of the services that's running out in the cloud. So you don't need to run everything on your machine. You don't need to pollute your local machine with all these different dependencies. So if you're interested in contributing to that kind of thing or have a better idea, I would certainly love to hear it, and I think that would probably land best in the platform's sake. At the moment, there's an onboarding SIG, but I don't really know what the status of that is. But I would say the platform SIG would be a decent jumpstart there.
Alright, as we run out of time, so I think, what time is it?
We got one more minute, maybe.
Got one more minute. So I think one thing, it would be great if everyone was aware that, while there are three, corporations represented up here, the Spinnaker roadmap is a community roadmap that can be filled in by anybody. And if you want to get involved, you go to the Spinnaker/community repo. That's where the roadmap is now. If you have issues like we talked about, file them in Spinnaker. We probably should look at figuring out to consolidate that. But the point is get engaged. Let us know kind of what you're looking for. This is an open source project. There are many, many different efforts looking at trying to make it easier to get onboarded. And so in the last 30 seconds, what is your number one priority for 2020? You have 30 seconds to say it.
Simplifying the Kubernetes developer and operator experience.
That was too broad. Same here.
Kubernetes, certainly.
Okay, you're not doing it? All right. Managed delivery is the biggest initiative that we're focused on at Netflix.
Yeah, one time I'll qualify a little bit. The biggest hurdle to adoption is still the install, configure, operate. So we would like to make as much progress in there as possible to get more companies using Spinnaker.
Awesome. So if you could join me in a round of applause for our panelists.